Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming this evening. And I'm very proud to present Dr. Darius-Mahdjoubi. And he's going to be talking tonight about a theme and a topic that is crucial in our lives, independently of your field, which is thinking and planning. And he's going to go in depth and enlighten us with his knowledge and experience. So without much further ado, please welcome Dr. Mahdjoubi to this evening.
I'm going to talk about something which is called integrative thinking. Sometimes it is referred to design thinking. But over there you see a term that probably you have not seen before. It's called Andishe. Let's go with the first one, is that why I'm thinking about Andishe, put it here. In Farsi, which is my first language, there are two terms for thinking. When you translate thinking, it comes two ways. One is tafakkur, which means thinking. Thinking about doing something, thinking about going home and make dinner. Thinking about how to go home. This is about thinking. Mm-hmm. And there's another part which is term which is andishe, with accent on the end of the game. If you take the accent, it doesn't mean. It is, or sometimes you can write both of them. It's about thinking about thinking. Thinking deeply, thinking broadly. You know that you're thinking. In the first case, you just think. In the second one, you know that you're thinking. And this term is not does nothing exist in English. The nearest thing to the to Andishe in English is intellect. But it means intellectuals. Andishe is broader. So I borrowed the case because on the other side we have borrowed many terms from English to Farsi. Sure. Of any other language. And this is the beauty of English, we can bring that. So the message is that if you don't know about this concept, if there's no term for it, it's difficult to explain it. Mm-hmm. Not that you know that there is a term for another type of thinking, an integrative thinking, is Andishe. So the term exists with all. If you're familiar with Rumi, all his text is about Andishe. Funny way, when they translate it in English, they're related to thinking. And when you translate it back, it doesn't make sense because it's not about thinking, it's about Andishe. So whole of the game is that you need to bring concept. So I borrowed this concept because I use it in class, and it's easy to tell, okay, what's Andishe? Everyone knows. And it is term being used very widely in Iran. It's not only for intellectuals. So that's it, Andishe. It's basically a term for integrative thinking, because the term integrative thinking is an adjective rather than I use it as a name. So I hope I have explained what is the meaning of Andishe. To explain it in a better way, look at this picture and tell me what this guy is thinking about. What is in mind that he's so concentrated? Why we don't look at the world this way anymore? Because we think rather than Andishe. Mm-hmm. You see that what he's watching that he's so concerned, how he's so interested in. Have you ever, what he's watching, what he's looking at? Make a guess.
A toy.
A dog.
A dog.
A fish.
Could be anything.
Could be anything. Yeah. Why we have lost this ability to think, to watch and think this way? We lose it. We have gone through these stages. We have gone to this case. Because we think rather than tradition. And so I think it's the best example of what is the difference between
Well, you don't really know. Maybe it's Andishe on the other side.
The other side, and by the way, I don't have it, the picture of the kids all in that earlier stage. Even cats go that way.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And when they grow up, think that way. So that is the case.
Yeah.
Okay, it's my interpretation. It's my way of explaining.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't like it, change it. But whole of the game, I'm trying to explain a term and the concept behind it.
Yeah.
So they are both thinking but different. So that is.
Yeah, it looks like the baby is thinking, but with a deep desire of learning what's going on. and the cat is just thinking about, I'm gonna go there and eat it.
That's exactly the difference between the two, the thinking and the share. And this is exactly what we are going to go that case. We go from just thinking about something to make it deeper. That's exactly my point, is that I hope I can get you by the end to that. What happens is that I went to Iran about 2013, and I had this opportunity to teach thinking. There was a course that was, entrepreneurs thinking, and entrepreneurs are think like others. So instead of putting on the entrepreneurship, I put it on thinking. And I started about, and my argument is that, and I started with that class, and by the way, this is the emblem of the Tehran University, when I was teaching and I was graduated. It's the first university, so we're very proud of it. And that, by the way, this is much bigger than the UT campus. Okay. It's about 60,000, so that one campus in Tehran, but different parts. So it's not small. I went there and I asked from the student, PhD student or doctorate students, management, asked him that, okay, this course is about thinking. How many courses have you taken so far about thinking? Because you are doctorate, you are master, bachelor, all of the things. And the answer is 0. You don't teach courses about how you think. You take courses about how you should think.
Yeah.
How you think. And actually it's everywhere. So I started to teach thinking that, this course that I'm briefing for you, and then brought it down to level and down to that, and these are my last graduates.
Oh.
This is the 5 years old in a kindergarten. And I went there and asked them that, do you teach to them how to think? And no, and to think. If you don't teach them how to think, what is more important topic that you're teaching? So we went to the same process of thinking. Of course, we don't get to this level. But cases that I made a case and they're thinking. So this is about. So the question coming is that how do you think? How each of us thinking? And how we can address this case. And this is about, have you ever taken any course on how do you think? And so Elaine told me that make it simple basically it's a continuation of the case. And the answer is that nothing. Because this is a simple question, but probably the most challenging question that we have ever faced, and we as humans, I mean Homo sapiens or Neanderthals, that we are in this stage of development, and probably any foreseeable in the future. All the questions that we have faced during the last 200,000 years are nothing compared to this one. Like how the universe started. There's nothing compared with this one. And it will continue to be the most challenging question of the humans. All of this question, how do we think? As simple as this, we think differently, but how to think is a very, very, very challenging question. And it is a very simple question and a very complex topic. Why? Because there are so many things that are related to thinking. The first one is brain. And we don't know what is brain. It is told that the brain, human brain, is the last unknown continent of the earth. Yeah. We just know a little bit about it. But we know that it is 1.5 kilograms, okay, because physical entity. So we know a little. The second one, which is mind, is way more complex than brain. Because we know brain exists, we don't know whether mind exists or not. We can imagination. And this is based on thinking. And if you go one step further, it goes to spirit and soul. Do they exist? How is it related to thinking? So you see that if you want to go, each of them is endless path. I want that you see the question that I'm asking. How do you recommend think? And then probably is that we think with our instincts. There are many things like cat. We have the same ability. And our ability to think is related to ability to speak. So we have a unique capability for speech, way more sophisticated than any other species, including the Neanderthals who existed before. And Noam Chomsky tells that language is not a tool of communication. Language is a tool of thinking. Our ability to think depends on language. For instance, if I were not able to talk about Andishe, half of the story would come. And this is ability to speak, and then role of first languages, and the role of second languages, and it's all about thinking. And then it's about culture, and about society, and family, and education, and training, and all of it. So if we want to go and explain the process of thinking from each a single one in an open-ended story, and we will never be able to get it any time in the foreseeable future. But I have a small trick on it. There is one thing more which is related to our way of thinking, and this is called methodology. Methodology defines the way we are thinking, and I'm explaining it. And if we go this way, we can get the result in about half an hour. This is what I'm going to do. So this is about the brain, that's by far the most complex physical object known to us in the entire cosmos. And if that's the brain, think about what could be mind. Way more complex than we can imagine the whole universe. But let's see what is the definition of methodology. This is the definition, is the broad system of principle arose to let us explicate different phenomena. We observe something, and we want to explicate it. Methodology comes to that case. Is this correct? Is this not correct? For instance, when you started with the FedEx logo, you knew the history. Now you know the history. How are you going to do that? It's about methodology. So this is, it's a tool for understanding. So let me make an example of what I mean by methodology. We can look at it as an operating system of a computer. If the brain is the computer, methodology is the operating system. Let it work. It could be like a candle, and it could be like a circle. By the way, you see the importance of the first language. I did all of this for my language, my first language, which is Farsi. I translate it back. And Farsi is written from right to left. So I forgot to change it from left to right. So the reason it comes from right to left, because I fixed the other one, but I changed the text. And it makes sense for that language, but it doesn't make sense here.
That's right.
So this is I just...
That calls the attention.
Pardon?
Calls the attention.
That's it. But my point is that you can see the cases. That's why I back and forth between two languages and two way of thinking. So, question is that how relationship between methodology that it's you don't use it very often. Simply look at the case. 200 years ago, we had no clue about the concept of energy. People did not have a common sense of energy. Look at different sources of energy differently. For instance, now if I ask you that, where is the source of this light? Probably you cannot tell.
True.
Because we don't know where it comes from, a power plant next to Austin, or from a turbine at a dam in California or Arizona, or atomic power plant somewhere, or wind, we don't know. Nobody can do that. We just know that the original source of it is sun. But because we have a sense of energy, 200 years ago people didn't have a sense of energy. They use it differently. That was a concept, or sense of technology. So these are concepts existed. Methodology is likely that case. If it is strange to you, just bear with that, but you'll get it by yourself. And all of the kind is that there's a concept that helps us to think. So to make it simple part, I'm going to, you see the same problem, to show you a video. And I gave you the paper, and I'm asking to tell me, how do you think to explain it? I'm not asking you what it reminds you, because it reminds different to the case. If I'm going to show it to you, I'll give you some time. Question, how you're going to explain it to me and how you're going to explain it to a 5 years old kid. That's a question that you're going to face. Two cases, because we have a different way of explaining. So the whole of the game is that I show you this case and you think about it. Tell me think about what you see, think about it, and how to explain your way of thinking. This is what I'm asking you. So it's the same problem. This is about the thunder. And I'm asking you to watch it, think about it, explain it. This is sometimes it doesn't work. So this is exactly the question. This is what we observe. And if you like, I can put it with sound. The same impression. How are you going to explain it? If you explain it in this context or similar to it, you know, this is the cloud. It doesn't matter, you know, you may know about it a little bit or you may not know. But basically, you explain that this is a natural phenomenon, happen between two clouds or clouds and Earth. If you think that way, it comes from scientific methodology. That is my example. I've done it many times and I've gone through the same process everyone got a case. And this is a real example. So if you don't need a paper to prove it. If you think that, if you see that way, and think about it in this context or similar to this one, the reason that you see it this way comes from scientific methodology. I hope I'm clear what I mean by methodology.
Yeah, well, I thought about, you know, the clouds are hitting, you know, each other, and then you have the friction, and then you have, you know, the noise from that friction and stuff, and then you get the, you know, the lightning. And I had to explain that to my daughter like 3 weeks ago, because she was like, why does that do that noise? And then we went up like, well, this is the clouds. Do you see the clouds in the sky? And yes. Well, when they hit each other, and then, you know, that happens. She didn't ask what the cloud was.
So,
but, you know, but that is because we were, you know, taught that way.
Absolutely, because it comes from that school and it comes from scientific analytic methodology. It came out of Renaissance. This is due to Galileo. Galileo mentioned this case that the Bible tells us how to go to heaven, how to go to heaven, rather than how the heaven works. And the first heaven is sky, and the second heaven is the first one is heaven, the second one is high. The reason that we look at it and comes as a natural phenomenon, this is fairly new. It's about 400 years, and they have been taught about 75 years. And we thought that everyone is here. No. If you go back 2,000 years ago and ask the same question from, you know, Greek philosopher, thinkers, all think, and what happened? They will tell you that this is a sign of Zeus. Because you know that the Zeus was god of the gods, and he was married to Venus. And one day Zeus came to a house and saw that there is another guy in the house with Venus. So he became angry. The other guy, that's the reason for this one. If you go and read that one. So the other god knew that he's not matched for Zeus. What he did, he fled. And Zeus sent an arrow and became fighting. So if your daughter would have asked you that question 2,000 years ago, and you were happened to be in Greece, yes, no.
My mother used to say to me that was San Pedro moving the furniture on the sky.
Yeah.
San Peter.
Yeah.
Exactly.
San Peter moving the furniture.
My grandmother which is
That's a
just
good one.
30 years, 33 years older than I am, he told a similar story, not that way in the Iranian version. Interestingly enough,
So my
The
kids are
Greek-
in a fork and a microwave.
the Indians have this almost the same story, because this is Indra, which is the female, man name. Not Indira is a female. Indra is a male. And this is the big guy with the sound of, with the symbol of lighting. There's an article in Wikipedia. There are about 140 symbols of the god of lightning in different cultures, and they are almost either number 1 or 2. So my point is that this shows that the first one is that we look at it and see this way or visualize this, think about it this way because of scientific methodology. The
That we've been taught.
Exactly. We have been taught. And this is the role of methodology. And they were not stupid people. Their methodology was mythical. And the difference for that is that they said this is the basis of scientific methodology, is that thunder is a natural phenomenon. We are able to understand natural phenomena even if we don't know now. We'll get it in the future. We have this ability to understand it. The second one is that the thunder is due to supernatural factors, and we are not able to understand supernatural factors. See what I mean by the role of methodology in thinking. This is almost end of my discussion. If you have gone to this case and we're going to get out, that is sufficient. We think the same way that our methodology allows us to think. We have been told this as de facto. This is as a truth, as a right. You get by this case, get papers. You get grades. No, it is a methodology. It's sometimes and sometimes going to change. And the question is that when it's going to change, how it's going to change. Because they never tell that this is a methodology.
Is that the way the scientists think then? It's always trying to prove wrong whatever they thought that was right?
What do you mean?
Every time that a scientist discovers something, he or she, keeps trying and to prove that what they found is wrong, so that they find something even, a little bit different to, prove that, and then they end up, having to try to find that they proved that was wrong was also wrong. So just to keep allowing them to grow on a way of thinking that is.
But the point is that we argue with the methodology.
Okay.
If you use this methodology, we can use it to say yes and no and go on.
Mm-hmm.
This is the basis of thinking. We have not changed it, this one. This is the bedrock.
Mm-hmm.
This is the bedrock of our education system. This is scientific way, and we are arguing that way. We don't have time to this case, but I can do it later on. How this concept came from astronomy, came to physics, to the other natural phenomena, and they brought it to social sciences, others, out of context.
Mm-hmm.
But the point is that this is a methodology. This is not the methodology. And the whole of the game is that we think as our methodology is case. My point is that this is not wrong. I'm not telling you this is wrong. We need to throw it out. This is a methodology. Actually, this one is also not wrong. This is application.
Yeah.
The reason for application is that we still have mythologies. They're still all old methodology. But we need to know where to use them, where not to use them. We use it as a truth and everything is wrong. Interestingly, they use the same thing. They thought this is truth and everything is wrong. So whole of the game is that what would be the next, when is the context, what was the outcome. Because this is analytic thinking. And I'm going to barely scratch on the integrative thinking. We are not going to go to depths of it, but I want to raise the point is that there is a place for a new way of thinking, and time is right for it. Because it doesn't happen out of blue. It takes the timing, and right timing is right for it. So whole of the game is this case. Understanding other factors of thinking also depends on methodology. Now we make a study about brain, how it works. But we use analytic methodology to validate it. All of the others, so if we change the If we know the scope of application and change it to a new one, everything else will change. So whole of the game is that we can think better if we can use more appropriate, better methodologies. Simple as this. We keep your brain because that's an endless story, and others. We change with methodology and we change the case. You may think about you keep the computer but change the operating system. And it behaves differently. So this is about operating system or way of thinking. So hold on, yes. Interestingly enough, I talked about two methodologies. The first one is thinking based on scientific methodology, and sometimes it's called observational analytic because it's based on observation and analysis. We use the term analysis as a stadium, analytic thinking. No, analysis means break it down. We break something down to make it, and this is the basis of the scientific methodology. We can break it down with that methodology. We cannot integrate. The whole of the game is that we know something goes wrong, we analyze it to find it what's the problem, what the mechanics are doing. That is analysis. But car is not designed by mechanic. Car is designed by designers, and designers think integrated. But they use analytic tool to use it. There's a difference between a designer of a car and a best mechanic. The mechanic use analysis. Doctors do the same thing. There's a difference between God and the doctor. The doctor uses analytic thinking and sometimes goes wrong to find out what's the problem. God makes it. God makes it.
The doctoring house was well left.
So whole again is that there are many methodologies in between. There are not single things that there are only two, because I've seen it before that there are two, and no, there are many, and we are not going to touch it. And they were before it. So the whole game is that we have layers of methodologies that we have not barely scratched on this to think that that's wrong, that is myth. No, myth is methodology and has application. So scientific, this is a myth, myth is wrong. No, myth is coming from mythical, and it has methodology, it has application. And the relationship between these different methodologies, they are not mutually exclusive. They are not necessarily either or. You can use it, all of them. This is like a pine tree that has different branches, and it grows. And we have gone at least 15 different branches of it. The point of scientific methodology is telling that I am right, the rest is wrong. And you go back, you see the same thing before and before and before. Each of them think that I am right. The others are wrong because they're myth. No, they all have application. And the whole of the game is that I'm right and I will continue to be right for end of the time. No, that sometimes it will continue to be bad, it needs to be changed. So we are going to change from analytic thinking, which is the first one, to a more integrative thinking, which is going to come. So this is the whole essence of the game, is that I will look at it as a branch rather than a whole tree. So this is exactly about methodology. Okay, let's go with this. So going back about what is thinking, going back to the same question. And my argument is that if we look at different methodologies and all other factors that I mentioned about the brain and the mind and the language and all the things, we come back to cases that each of us has a unique way of thinking, like a finger trip. They're all similar to each other, but on the other side, they're all unique. We are all unique way of thinking. We need to explore this unique way of thinking and see the scope of application, what is right, when it is right, and when it is not wrong. And so whole of the game. So that basically it is that. And by the way, I gave a present just before to Austin about 2 months ago. I gave a class similar to this one because I went to a very fair-to-do class, fair-to-do school to teach integrative thinking to 9 to 12 years old. Because it covered from 5 years to 65 years. Perhaps 61. Others are not. I am important, so it goes on. So everything else, and
it may be different next year, though.
Sure.
It could be 66.
Right.
Yeah, maybe something.
And then a year after that,
I
67.
that,
Exactly.
you know, but anyway, my point is that it's called all of this. And this is the poster for that class. It's like a fingerprint. It's a brain and fingerprint on the same time. They decided this case to explain this. So there's a reason is that we have thinking and it is unique. We want to know what is that. So, whole of the game, let me summarize. This is what I have told so far. We think based on our methodology. If you understand your methodology, the relationship, everything else, you know about your thinking. Simple as this. As simple as this. And we are being told different methodologies, and each of them claim that they're right, others are wrong. None of them look at the case as a pine tree that different shapes and the case. And the point is that we're going to grow. What will be the next one? All of the things that I'm going to Twitter is about this case. We think as our methodologies define us, or let us to know. If you know your methodologies, and remember, I'm using methodologies rather than methodology, because we use different methodologies for different purposes. We know what is that one, whether it's correct or not correct, we can use it, and we know that limitation of each of them and the scope of application of each of them. So, now I'm going to start a new concept. So that's the first part is done. And it's about media, because the methodology, we find it, okay, how to go further. How much do you have time there?
Oh, I don't know. What time is it?
523.
5:23. Oh, we're good.
Okay. I use media for all tools and systems of communication. So media is not limited to TV, it's not limited to newspapers, it's not limited to computers. The term media, which is a plural of medium, covers all of them. So media is cover all of them, and the languages that we speak are the oldest shape of media, or medium. That is because, first of all, it is intrinsically related to us, and the other point is that it is at least half of our age. You know, we have 200,000 years old as Homo sapiens. Because the main difference, or a main difference between us and the next one to us, which is Neanderthals, is ability to talk. We have a unique ability to talk, distinct from any other species in the world. And if you don't believe me, this is the proof of it. We are not able to drink water or any other beverage and breathe.
Let me see.
You try that. You try that.
No, don't do this. You're going to choke.
We cannot do that.
Open your mouth.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, one
And
close the other.
interestingly enough, kids can do it.
Kids can do it?
Can do that.
No,
So-
if you drink and breathe, you're going to have water in your lung,
Exactly.
and you're going to be.
Because we have ability to talk. Kids, when they probably have better experience when they're drinking milk from their mother or they drink and breathe on the same time. This is the reason when they're done, you need to put them outside and push it on their back so
Babies.
that so they can to take it out, because they have certainly taken air inside. That's the reason we have such a sophisticated way of talking, because the part that separates this one is much upper part in other animals, including Neanderthals. And now we have been sophisticated, so it has lowered the case, so we are not able to drink and breathe at the same time, to give us a much broader scope of speaking. So that's the reason we are not able to drink and breathe, because of the ability to talk. This is language. This first thing about thinking. So languages that we speak are the oldest media and is related directly to the way that we think. Everything else is a continuation of language. So the media is a basis for thinking. And Then came, and so language is about at least 100,000 years or something around that time, because we cannot trace it. But we know the ability to speak. It goes there intrinsically with the Homo sapiens, the shape of our skull has been changed based on this case. So it is about 100,000 years old, at least. Writing is about 7,000 years old, changed in new media. It is the beginning of history and all the things come. So the media is very important. So to show the relationship between media and methodology, I showed this case. And my argument is that there is a correlation, there is some relationship between media and methodology. This requires a historical study. I cannot prove it to you because the first one for more or less physical, that thunder. But these are some studies. So is that we have, for instance, out of this time, about 5,000 years ago, all human thinking was based on oral language, based on text. So thinking went that way. Everything was based on poetry, and then text came in. And law came out of that case, and logical thing came out of that case. So there is a correlation between media and methodology and thinking. So if you want to study about thinking, and now we can go back and trace that way of scientific way that we are thinking to the printing, which happened on 1450s. It's the basis of Renaissance. So the whole Renaissance and everything, because we know that before 1400, the power is in the East, from China to Rome. And China is way ahead of the game, number one, the distance from number two, which is the Middle East and India, and the rest. And there's no mentioning of the West Europe to about 1400. The 1400 Renaissance came in and it started to change the shape of the globe. And it was one of the pillars of the Renaissance was printing. This is something that we can discuss about. Printing made this possible, the scientific methodology to come up. And there's a reason that we look at the thunder and we're not afraid of it because we know this based on nature. For instance, I knew from last Sunday that today will be raining. That's or not, like I look at my cell phone. It's related to that ability of the nature. Now we have some sense of understanding what will happen.
Even though they get it wrong quite a few times. I think it's the easiest job, there is. Because they say, well, it's going to rain, and it doesn't rain, well, it changed.
The point is that because here it's not far from the ocean, so the weather is much more fluctuating. For instance, in Iran, because the weather comes from the Mediterranean, you're almost accurate because it gives you some time to adjust, and the weather is not changing. So it comes like this. But the Houston, it changes 5 minutes because.
And in Rio, nobody trusts the weather service in Rio.
So one whole of the game is that this is the case, is that thinking depends on methodology. That is easy to comprehend, but the second one is not easy, but I will present that. Methodology depends on media. And look at that way, but actually go this way. It's not an elevator that you put over it, take you up. It's like escalator, it goes with the differences. It goes from media to methodology and then goes to thinking. Then, it stayed that way for maybe a long time, and then a new wave comes, a new media, a new methodology, and new thinking, and goes up. Mm-hmm. That is the way to go that way. For instance, look at the case, the oldest way is media is oral language. If you look at the case during the last 100,000 years, for about 95,000 years, everything is based on oral language. All tradition comes from that case. We transfer knowledge from generation to generation based on the story and things. For instance, that story that I mentioned about the Iranian year calendar of the March 21st, this is not new. It's about 4,000 years old because it defines when the spring is going to come, when is the changing, because without knowing this one, there would be no agriculture in revolution. 1,000 years ago. So everything is about, and preparation for it show that the new year, the new season is going to come. And
You
the
can
whole-
start, yeah, you can start planting again,
But planting
to
again,
harvest
yeah.
and so on.
And so you see that the same thing happens in Europe. That what is important, always is very accurate, because the beginning of the year is not accurate to level of day. It's accurate to level of second. You calculate it when the sun center of Earth goes from winter to spring, and that is very, very accurate timing. So that's the universal time. So when we celebrate here, it's exactly the time in the Torah. So I know what happened, because it's important. And if you go back, you see that at least a couple of thousand years old. For most of this time, this was tradition based on oral story about things. So the first word is the media is the language, and methodology is mythical. That the story of the Zeus come from that oral language. And thinking was mythical, and sagas and tradition. Then it changes to the text and writing on papyrus, and came the Greek logic. Because you can write on text. You see that, for instance, writing in China is different. The way of thinking is different.
Yeah.
Yeah, because now they start to be able to, go back and base on information that was written, and then you start in the process of thinking to grow that, thought again. And then go, oh, hold on a second, I'm, deviating too much, so they can go back and then do it again.
For instance, as I mentioned, is that
Yeah, because of the writing. So that's
because
why
of
it
the
changed.
importance of writing, for instance, go to later on if you can time, or maybe next time, is about the importance of the Latin writing. It's very easy. It was separated. It's easy to write, because it are 26 letters.
Right.
Chinese is about 2,000.
Yeah.
For instance, the first language that because in Iran we use Farsi, but we use Arabic text, Latin. It has about 30 letters, but each of them they have 4 shapes. The beginning, the middle, separate, and end are separate shapes. You can see that it's O, but O, the position of O, shape of the position of O, like B. If it is B in the beginning, it has one shape. If the B in the middle is another shape. If it is ending, is another shape.
Wow.
If it is separate, is another shape. So you need to know about 300 to 600 shapes.
Oh gosh.
Absolutely, because coming
You
from
don't
other
write,
things.
you draw.
Yeah, that's exactly the case. But on the other side, for instance, we just to make comparison, the first time that she told me about Evelyn told me about the story of this concert, and she asked me, do you know the Atash? I don't know. No. And I noticed that they have written it wrongly. It should be double A and one A, because the first one is A, and Atash means fire. Atash means thirsty. I'm not saying that one, because it's A and A. So it has the same problem in English. You put A, and it doesn't mean whether it is short or long.
Right.
So you make a guess, and sometimes you make wrong.
Right.
Yeah.
So for instance, this is the reason that put right Iran, and they spell it Iran. Because
Right.
they have the problem with the Latin English the case. So my point, I don't want to exaggerate the case, anything has a compromise. Anyhow, the point of the matter is that Latin alphabet is fairly easy
Yeah.
compared to other things. But go to that case, you see that the media change to text and handwriting on paper, which was imported from China, it was Korea, and they came to Europe, changed the shape of the scholastic shape. It's different from papyrus, because papyrus is not very reliable. Paper is, if it's a good paper, it can
lasts
go
a
on
long
for
time.
thousands.
Yeah.
Papyrus is not. And it's very fragile.
Yeah.
And it came another one, and then came writing by printing. It made the basis for the scientific revolution. That the reason that so that we look at the sky and see clouds is the ability to write on paper. See the relationship. The methodology is about the media is a basis for methodology, and the methodology is a basis for thinking. That is the point. So let's go back, and I think that we can start here. And by the way, you see that again, I'm using from right to left. This is what we are at this stage, to year 2000. The dominant shape of media is printing. At least it was to about before 2000. Now it's changing. The dominant one. It's still the dominant. And methodology is scientific methodology. That is the reason that we look at the sky and look at it as a cloud, because it came from scientific methodology. And thinking is analytic or linear. There's a reason that you have seen so many times FedEx and you have not seen the arrow inside it. Because the thinking is analytic. And there's a reason that, artists or students of the art in Dallas, they were able to visualize it because they are not thinking so linear. If you finish my classes and I ask you to remember two things, I will do the second, that there is an arrow in the FedEx logo. And if you get it, that's just sufficient for me for the whole class. Because if you remember this one, everything else will come. Because there's a sub, and if you don't see it. And the point is that I bet from day to day, you will never forget this class. Because you will see FedEx logo. Brings you the idea.
We'll think of you.
Everything of me. And actually, I got.
If FedEx go bankrupt.
It makes no difference.
Then we may forget you.
No. Okay, in Iran there is no FedEx, so I tell them as students, but I tell them the traffic light as a symbol for FedEx. And to them, the traffic light you see is a model, because the color means something. The color means something. It's not just a random. And in my classes in Iran, I told this case with the story of the modeling of the Ruby model for the thinking. And one of my students saw me and told me that, you have ruined my life. Sorry, what did I do? I sit on the car and there's a traffic light, and I look at the red one and the story start classes and the models and thinking and blah, 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 blah. And the next one pouring that, putting that the traffic the light is green and you're still there. And it happens every day. So if you forget about it, if FedEx is bankrupt, don't worry about it. You see the traffic light for a long time.
You can use Amazon as well, because Amazon has the A to Z arrow, has a happy face, and
there are almost
that.
all of them, but
Yeah.
The beauty of the case is that the beauty of the FedEx. I have about 20 of these shapes, in Amazon.
Please don't run.
Almost, all logos have the same something in the middle. Like Apple, for instance, probably that why the shape of Apple this one, because why the shape of Apple this one.
Because somebody took a bite?
Yes, and remember that the byte also in
Atom.
computer. No, there's a byte of the Apple, and byte is also a unit of
Megabyte.
computer.
8 bits is 1 byte.
So that's it.
Oh, like the megabytes.
Megabyte come from
Oh,
that.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, absolutely. I know.
Thank
many.
you for enlightening me.
So you have never looked at it, why there is a byte on the Apple?
Interesting.
Because it's also.
I think with the Apple, there's also a thing with the the lead being that way. I don't remember now what it was, but.
This is a story that we may make about it.
Yeah.
So all of the game is that we are this stage of life. The media is printing. This is the reason that we use scientific methodology, because it came from that process. Printing happens 1450 by Gutenberg. Galileo is 1600.
But
Yes.
sorry, but the question is, okay, they have a story behind the logo, but it's like normal people is able to see that without knowing the history behind.
That's the
That's the whole point. Is that
That's the point,
they
yeah.
put it in a way to make it more interesting. Is that they don't want it. Actually, when they designed for this logo for FedEx, they wanted to make it clarified. No, leave it there. And there are many more. They're just not.
It's a
out.
subliminal.
Yes, so
Yeah, that's the idea. That's
That's the
what
idea.
they. Yeah, that's
to
what
make
they.
it that you'll think about it. So whole of the game is that now we are in the verge of a new transformation, and integrative thinking comes from this process. In around in the year 2000, we have seen this change in our eyes. And that is the new transformation. Because printing, which was here, brought the price of knowledge to about 100 times cheaper and make it faster about 200 times. That was the beginning. Now we have the phase that the price, but it kept the context, the text. The text was handwritten and converted to printing and made the foundation for that transformation of the Renaissance, everything come out. Now we are a phase that it has all mediums, all forms, all time, everywhere free.
Can I say just one thing? Because I'm thinking about your answer, your question. Is that can the normal person see it, right? In the way, and I think the reason why I wanted you to talk to us about integrative thinking is exactly because of that. Because we are taught to think linearly, right? We are taught not to think, basically, because we are taught to think, but not to Andishe,
Yeah, absolutely.
right? Not to Andishe. Remember that he introduced the term Andishe as whole thinking, integrative thinking. We are taught to think, and when we are taught to think, that's very linear and very narrow.
Absolutely.
So
Let me example.
Yeah.
It's like looking at a tree in the winter. This is the structure of the science. You go to the branches and branches and branches, and every branch is separated. So every branch look at itself as a linear process that goes to the root. Mm-hmm. We are being told that case. We go to this, for instance, we go to university, and as you go further and further, it becomes narrower and more precise.
Specialize.
And forget about the rest. And funny way, they have a tool for it. And the tool for it comes from the Latin, it's called ceteris paribus, or ceteris paribus. If you translate it in English, called all else being equal. You mean that
all else being equal,
it is that, what I don't know doesn't matter, because it's equal. And what it doesn't matter to me is not important. My area is important. So there's a joke that I make this for classes, that you go to accounting, or to marketing, and this is phrase in marketing, that marketing is everything, everything is marketing. And you go to the next class is accounting, and tell you that accounting is everything, everything. And everyone has a catchphrase for this, or this is what I mean, because my audience makes mostly management students. Yeah. So every professor has a tool to justify that I am important. So we look at the case of the tree, it's in winter. We go back before, like Rumi and others, and they are holistic thinkers. They look at the tree and they see it in summer. The whole of it, and they don't see behind it. They don't see it. Both of them are correct. There's nothing wrong, but they are different for different purposes. And we know, because we have this ability to think, to recognize that this tree it is in the spring, so it is something in between. It became a full tree that you don't see any branch, and it became a branch without the trees. We are told with the academic sense because it comes from this analytic thinking.
I'm trying to, because I know this is where the dyslexia kids, they're different. And they are trying to put them in the line, and they don't think like that. Because my son is dyslexic, like he's all over the place at once. It's like he cannot focus on that little thing. He thinks like that.
Yeah, but that's exactly. The point is that they are not mutually exclusive. They are not against each other. We need to know both of them. Mm-hmm. So if you give me a minute, I will show you what I mean a little bit further. So we are in the verge of a transformation. We look at it, I put it a threshold of 2000. And the reason for it is threshold, because I can threshold 1975, it doesn't matter, we put threshold of Renaissance 1400, and it doesn't mean that, in the December.
1400, it could be like 1386.
Every time. The reason for it, as I put it over here, is that I have an extended cousin He is about 14 years old or something. He came to visit us with my mother last summer. And at home, I have an old BlackBerry telephone, before.
Mm-hmm.
It was
With the keypad.
but the keypad, and that was very sophisticated. At that time, it was $1,200.
Wow.
They're absolutely very expensive. My brother gave it to me because he got from his company. This legal company gave it to them. Now I have no application for that BlackBerry, but it has a very teeny weeny, picture
Screen.
screen, which is not sensitive, but it has a very nice analog clock. So I put it next to my bed, and it pointed it's always there. It's almost like this one, but that one is much nicer. So it is always shows digital. That Studio 2000 came from that process. And so it is always there. And this extended cousin, which is the grandchild of my aunt, so that's that way. This is third generation, and the second, he's the third one. He came over here, and I took because I'm with my mother when I'm in Iran. That to leave to go to mountain. So he was there because I was sure that somebody is with my mother. Mm-hmm. And he was the case, and when I came back, I asked him that, how do you do? I told him, your telephone killed me. And I told him, how did my telephone kill you? I told him, it doesn't work. The story is that every day at 7 o'clock it starts the alarm. Oh. And he tried to kill the alarm by touching it. And it doesn't work. Absolutely. And I told him, but the key is here. But why the screen works? I told him, because this is not
touch screen.
A touch screen. This is one generation before. And I noticed that because this telephone that I'm using is not Windows Apple One, but is almost equal to it. I'm so easy to use because it's small. I have two others in there, but all again. It came in 2007. So it means kids who've been 7 years old at that time, they have no idea about the life before it, how there was something like telephone that you use it for telephone, and it was not sensitive. So that is the threshold of 2000. And so we are facing with a new transformation that everything is changing. The media changes to internet, but this is half of the story. So internet comparable to printing. But there is one thing else, is that when you go to that time is printed and writing. Something is missing in the game as the conceptual models. This is something that if we have time, maybe could have got. So far, we think with writing like these notes. In conceptual models, is that you see phenomena and you make models out of it. And look at the case, how many models I have presented to you so far. If I want to write what I told you, it takes about 2,000 pages. I need 2,000 pages to explain what I just told you. And you may think that how come it possible? It's very simple. Look at the case. This one. If I want to write about the relationship between media, methodology, and thinking in the context of timing, each of them requires a couple of hundred pages. To show that, an example of the oral language was a base for mythical methodology, and mythical methodology was a base for mythical thinking. And how it changed from the language and takes on handwriting on papyrus and leads to the Greek logic. This is at each of them a couple of 1,000 pages, and then changes to this one and this one. Each of them a couple of cases, and the other thing with these models, you have an understanding of the concept without text, so that this is not vertical elevators, bang, bang, bang. It's all this story. Fourth industrial revolution. I think no, it's about it takes time. For instance, when the handwriting came, between these takes about 3,000 years. For the last one, between and this one is 300 years. From the invention of printing to the evolution of analytic thinking, which is ours, it takes about 300 years. So it's going faster, but it's not going instantly. So now we are in this transformation that this part has been done, but we still continue to use the old system as it was before. So that's something they asked me about the computer, about PDF and anything else, and you know, these are garbage in, garbage out. What is important, what is in PDF, because
Yeah.
PDF is just transformation from writing to internet. But the content is important. And as far as the content, and it will continue to be. It's not going throughout, but point is that it gives us another version. For instance, I would have not been able to give this presentation maybe 15 years ago. Because 15 years ago, I remember that I went to Iran, and whenever I wanted to give presentation, I need to give it on the template, an overhead.
Yes.
And how many overhead you could make? 10. Because after it was out of money. And overhead, how many of these models I have shown to you because of this technology that goes with this computer, with this one, and this one, all of that. This technology did not exist 10 years ago.
Right, and now you plug in a TV, and before you need to have like something to.
Yeah.
Present. And look at the case of the case is that 10 years ago I was not able, because the core of my presentation is that video on the thunder. Without it, the thunder video that I showed you. Because after it, if I told you to think about this case, it doesn't make sense. It is.
Yeah, you wouldn't be able to show about the thunder, happening.
Yeah, exactly. Because that you would have your interpretation of another
You
thunder
need to
by
imagine.
yourself.
Yeah.
So the result is different. I put it with think about this case and explain it this thunder. And not your presentation, your memory, your feeling. Explain it to me, so it will come all the same thing. And by the way, let me give you some trick of the game. Because I have thought about each of these symbols separately. This was what I showed. Immediately after it, I showed this picture. Because I want to make connection between this picture and this picture. It is not selected by accident. I had this one, and I look at least 200 different thunder pictures to come to this one, because it has all the elements that we need. So I want that you think about this one and come to this one. So by intention, I wanted that you think the way that I think.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Because I want to compare it.
Yeah, because the model here, the scientific model in here, is the one that explains the most complex one, and then that one is a very complex.
Yes, because for instance, if there was only one, this is thunder from cloud to earth, this is one thunder.
Yeah.
It has all the elements that I want.
Mm-hmm.
And this could not have happened 10 years ago.
Is that Florida?
Actually, it's India.
India.
It's Mumbai.
Okay.
But it makes no difference. They ask me, I'm just explaining the location. So, all of again is that it would not be possible to give this presentation 10 years ago. And I can explain to you in a minute why I selected that thunder and where it came from. So, the whole of the game is this one. That we are in the transformation, that we are in this stage. And we are entering a new age of transformation, which is 2002. And this probably will be the result. This part has been done. Methodology has not yet been developed, because we use analytic thinking, analytic methodology, using sophisticated tools. So this part is not yet done. We are in this stage. And because we have not yet developed an integrative methodology. We don't have tool for integrative thinking.
But the way I don't know, I could be wrong, but I just want to make a comment and then see if that is related somehow. Because nowadays, because of the internet and all the ways of thinking, and then you watch a video on YouTube or Facebook or whatever, and then you decided that yourself that you are now a specialist, right? Like, let's say somebody goes there and watch a video or something, and now I'm a specialist in this subject. And then when somebody is saying something else differently, and then, you know, that person is going to argue, and then, you know, it becomes like very, you know, extreme. Like, you know, two sides. There is no like more of like a conversation anymore. You know, everything appears to be like either political, right or left. Let's say religion. You know, is either
Mine is
one.
right, yours is wrong.
Yeah,
But
and
remember,
then
that's
it's
exactly,
about like
they're
hatred.
using this part, this internet, at this methodology.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I mean, is this because the disruption that is going on at the moment, and then you still have like the old way of thinking with a much more complex media?
Probably, that's what we are facing. If you hold it, I will come back to that point a little bit.
There is, whenever you find a stopping point, so we can take a
I'm going to stop.
10-minute
Yeah,
break.
Yeah,
Thank you.
This is almost end of my presentation for this part.
Okay.
All again is that we need methodology to come to integrative thinking. And this happens because this part exists emerging. For instance, 50 years ago or 20 years ago, this part did not exist. So there was no tool for integrative methodology to let us to integrative thinking. So the first part is emerging. So I'm not going to do today about what is integrative, because it's a long way. My point is that to raise questions and tell that the fundamental thing is that, the first one, we think as our methodology defines. We think scientifically, so based on that case, the methodology is scientific, so the thinking is linear. And we think that it is correct. No, it is a way of thinking. It has application, for instance, by this way you maintain a car. You have a problem with your car and go that way to fix the problem. Doctors more or less use that one. But designers, they don't use it. They use different thinking. Okay. So if you look, let me show, I will give you something to think about this case, but I will end my presentation. You see that these are all my slides for all the case. I'm sorry, I'm not yet. So,
It's much more beautiful.
This is up Marina's alley, right, Marina?
I showed this picture, and this is an example of integrative thinking. So I showed them in my class and told them where it is. And by the way, I took this picture from Google Map. I did it by message. I knew somewhere, went down and took a picture and asked them where it is. Where is this location?
Where?
Yes,
Are you asking us too?
exactly. Where do
be
you think?
anywhere.
Pardon?
Can be anywhere.
Could be anywhere, but let me explain how it is. You see that this is easy. This is American city. This is a highway. These are
Yeah.
Yeah,
parking lot.
public that is not
Complex of
fully-
apartments and, you know.
Okay, these are
play area.
couple of building blocks. Each of them, if you look at from the shadow, it's about 6 levels.
Mhm.
So it could be everywhere. No,
Right.
it could not be everywhere. This is a specific place. Look at the case. What is this one? This is the first iPad.
Right.
This is the first iPhone. And you see, you think that this is just by accident. Look at this shape. No, this is Apple headquarters.
Oh,
And that guy taught integratively. You see I'm not Apple person, you know, I've never used any Apple. I'm just locked over here.
because it's my computer, I love
No,
it.
not that case. Don't take me wrong. I'm not an Apple promoter.
Sure.
But I have taught, I have studied everything I could about Steve Jobs. And by the way, he was an awful person.
Yeah.
But from technology part, he was an integrative thinker. You see that level of integration in anything. And you see this one. This is not, no, this is actually Apple headquarters. And this
But
is
you're
called-
born like that, no? How can it be?
He was born, but he
Yeah.
can educate people.
How?
Just give me time.
No, but he was a designer, and then basically all of his thinking came from when he learned how to draw letters, because that was his specialty.
Yeah, he learned that.
Whole of the game is that, remember that case, is that your grandmother did not look at the cloud and look at it as integrated. You were told, you were educated to that level that you see the cloud. Thunder as 12 clouds. It's possible to teach integrated thinking. This is what I teach in Iran. This is what I teach in my workshop here. This is just 1.5 hour total. My classes are about 40 hours. But it's possible. And my intention is not to squeeze that one. My point is that to raise that there is a way of thinking. I'm ending this presentation. The way of thinking is about methodology, and the methodology that we have, scientific methodology that came from Renaissance. And we are verge of transformation. Sorry, these are all my adnot. And this is the case. We are in the verge of a transformation to a new way of methodology, which is based on integrative, and the integrated thinking is about combining everything. On the same time, you are able to see elements, so there's no contradiction between them. It's not the case that there's a holistic thing, blah, blah, blah. No, on the same time, it's practical. But you see, so basically it is like FedEx logo. You see the hole, you see the arrow, you are not able not to see it, but on the same time, you still look at it as FEDX. And this is the whole of my presentation for today.
For now.
For now.
Thank you. So let's take a 10-minute break so we can